Bank statements don't lie, but the woman who slept beside me for 10 years apparently could. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 42, an architect, living in a quiet suburb north of Boston. Every morning I drink black coffee with no sugar, listen to NPR on the drive to the office. Every evening I come home at 7, hug my wife, ask a few casual questions about dinner or laundry. My life, clean, minimal, stable, until it exploded, not with a scream, but with one single cold black line of text on a laptop screen. Last Friday, I logged into my bank email to confirm a wire transfer for a land purchase. There was a strange alert in my inbox from an old sub-account I hadn't checked in months, the account I opened years ago to hold my inheritance from Aunt Eleanor. I clicked. Subject line, transfer successful, $58,000, sent to account ending in 7231. I didn't recognize the account number. I hadn't initiated any transfers. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the transaction history. In the past 3 months alone, there had been 7 withdrawals, totaling over $240,000. Nearly a third of the inheritance gone. No investment records, no approval, no signature from me. I don't remember how long I stared at the screen. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. The only thing that snapped me out of it was the sound of Ashley's heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She had just come back from the gym. Sweat still glistened on her forehead. Crop top, black leggings, ponytail high and tight. She still looked beautiful like always. But I no longer saw my wife. I saw a stranger living in my house, spending my money, lying straight to my face. I didn't say a word. No, what is this? No, where did the money go? I printed out the bank statements, slipped them into a blue folder, and tucked them into the same case as my school design proposal. I zipped it shut like it carried explosives. Ashley didn't notice. She smiled, poured 2 glasses of orange juice, kissed me lightly on the cheek. Business as usual, but inside I was anything but fine. My heart pounded like a concrete block was pressing on my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay still in the dark, listening to the soft, steady breathing of the woman beside me, and felt like I was sharing a bed with a thief. The first feeling was shock, sharp, needle-like, but it didn't last. Anger surged fast and hot, burning through every thought. I refused to collapse. I couldn't afford to. She wasn't worth it. 3 days later, I pulled out Aunt Eleanor's will. I read every line, every clause, and I found it. A single sentence that felt like a lifeline in the wreckage. Inheritance shall remain separate property, not subject to division, if financial deception or breach of marital trust can be demonstrated. That was my chance. Not just to get the money back, but to reclaim my dignity, my pride, and the decade I poured into this so-called marriage. I called Mark, my best friend from college, now a financial advisor. He came over that evening. We sat in the garage, the same place where I usually tuned up my car, 2 cold beers between us. "You sure about this?" he asked. "I can't afford not to be," I said. He nodded, his expression grim. "Then you start now, step by step." That night, I created a hidden folder on my laptop. I began collecting every shred of evidence I could find: bank records, notes, screenshots, calendar inconsistencies, credit card anomalies. Every detail, from gas station charges to online orders, went in. I was no longer a betrayed husband. I was an architect redrawing the blueprint of his life. Precise, detached, methodical. 1 week later, I made the call to Sarah Chen, the divorce attorney Mark had mentioned months ago. The meeting was set for Monday morning. I printed another copy of the documents, slipped them into a brown leather case. As I was walking out the door, Ashley asked, "Early meeting?" I turned, smiled. "Got a design review, pretty important." She nodded, no suspicion in her eyes. And I walked out of my own house, this time not to work, but to start a war. Unlike other men I'd met, those who smashed things, shouted in the living room, or stormed out, I did none of that. No rage, no broken glasses, no confrontations. I did the one thing I knew best. I made a plan. I started by checking every bank account I was tied to, personal, joint, backup. I requested full transaction history for the past 12 months. Every night, after Ashley fell asleep, I'd go into my study, put on my noise-canceling headphones without any music, and sit in silence, like an engineer sifting through the rubble after a collapse. I found patterns, repeated charges at fine dining spots downtown, luxury spa services, a weekend trip she once said was a yoga retreat with the girls. But the hotel invoice showed 2 guests, and the second name was someone I'd never heard of, Dylan Parker. I Googled him, a personal trainer, hundreds of shirtless photos on Instagram, posing with sports cars and protein shakes. Then I found one photo taken from a side angle. In the blurred background, Ashley. No tags, no caption, but the way she looked at him, you don't forget that gaze. I didn't save the picture. I stared for a few seconds, then closed the tab. Yes, it hurt, but not enough to break me. I reminded myself each piece of evidence was another brick in the bridge leading me out of this mess. I wasn't building a weapon. I was building a shield to protect what was still mine. I started a daily log. Who withdrew what, where it went, how much, and what it matched up with. One entry stood out. Ashley used my card to buy a Tiffany necklace, then a week later told me it was a birthday gift from a female client who was grateful for help with her showroom. I documented every story she told me, date, time, content, even her tone and facial expressions. The more I wrote down, the more I saw her pattern. This wasn't just emotional betrayal, it was calculated, covered up, manipulated, and she thought I would never catch on. I bought a new USB drive and labeled it Project Sentinel, like a sensor. Inside it, I stored every shred of data I collected, spreadsheets, screenshots, the inheritance contract, legal clauses, even iCloud emails between Ashley and Dylan, accessed through an old iPad she'd forgotten to log out of. I also recorded parts of our conversations, when Ashley talked about financial pressure or needing some extra freedom, or how she felt suffocated lately. Her voice was soft, sometimes even tender, but now all I could hear was avoidance, deflection, a carefully spun narrative. Once I had enough, I met with Mark again, this time at a small bar tucked behind the train station, far from anyone we knew. I handed him the summary. "What are you planning to do with all this?" Mark asked. "I need a lawyer, one that's sharp, strategic, and ruthless." He paused for a moment, then nodded. "I know someone, Sarah Chen. She doesn't advertise. Clients come to her for one reason. She wins." I nodded back. "Set it up." "You sure? Once you start, there's no going back." I looked at him, slow, firm, and clear. "I'm not going back." Sarah Chen's office was on the 11th floor of a glass building in Boston's financial district. Frosted glass doors, dark wood furniture, every item in the room arranged with the precision of a high-end architectural layout. Nothing was out of place. She greeted me with a firm handshake. Small frame, straight-cut black hair, sharp eyes that didn't hold a smile for long. "I've reviewed what Mark sent me," she said as we sat down. "Legally, you're in a strong position, but we have to prepare like this is going all the way." I nodded. "I'm not here to fight over scraps. I just want to protect what's mine. And that includes the inheritance," she said, flipping through the copy of Aunt Eleanor's trust. "This clause is strong. If we can prove financial deception, the assets remain separate property. I have proof." I placed the USB on the table. "And I'll keep gathering more if necessary." She nodded with approval. "Then we build a full case, financial and behavioral. The more solid our timeline, the easier it'll be to push for settlement." I left that first meeting with a clear plan and something I hadn't felt in weeks: relief. Not because the battle was over, but because for the first time I knew I was moving forward. To make this work, though, I had to stay in the house. Pretend nothing had changed. I had to live as both husband and documentarian, keep my temper steady while my mind calculated the next move. The following weeks were a masterclass in performance. I got up on time, ate breakfast with her, listened to her talk about work, projects, future plans, all of which I now knew were a facade. I kept my responses short, polite, smiled when needed, stayed quiet when appropriate. I wasn't acting. I was controlling every movement, like I was building a 3D rendering for a structure I knew would collapse. Ashley began to show signs. She started hiding her phone, flipping its screen down when I walked into the room. Occasionally, she'd leave abruptly, citing a last-minute client emergency. I didn't push. The more secure she felt, the more careless she became. One evening, while she was in the shower, I quietly opened her purse. Inside was a hotel reservation for 2 guests this coming weekend at a Vermont resort. The second name, Dylan Parker. I snapped a photo and sent it to Sarah. Her reply came within minutes. Good, we'll use this, but not yet. I understood. The most effective moves are always about timing. I kept playing the role of the oblivious husband, but in my head I was already in the conference room, laying out legal timelines, planning the reveal. Late one night, Mark called. You holding up? I'm tired, I admitted. Feels like I'm living 2 lives. You're almost there, just hold a little longer. I looked out the window, headlights streaming across the road. In the dark, this house no longer felt like a home. It was a crime scene, a mask, the stage for one final act before the curtain dropped. Tomorrow, Sarah would send the official legal notice to Ashley, the letter that would start the war. I shut down my laptop, turned off the lights, and went back to the bedroom. Ashley was already asleep. I lay down beside her like every night. But this time, I didn't face the wall. I stared straight at the ceiling, and I knew I wouldn't be sleeping here much longer. That morning, it was drizzling. The sky was a flat gray, like an old sheet pulled tight across the city. I woke up earlier than usual. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, I adjusted my tie like I always did, but my hands were trembling, just a little. Not from fear, from the quiet certainty that after today, there'd be no turning back. At 9:00 a.m., Sarah confirmed via email the divorce petition had been filed, and the legal notice was en route via express courier to our home. I wasn't there to watch Ashley receive it. I had already left, sitting at a small cafe a few blocks away, phone face up on the table, waiting. 10:14 a.m. The phone rang. The screen lit up. Ashley. I let it buzz 3 times before answering. Ethan. Her voice was higher than usual, strained. I'm here. What is this? She blurted. A letter. Divorce papers? You've been talking to a lawyer? Since when? About 3 weeks ago, I said, calm. 3 weeks. So this whole time you knew? She paused, then snapped. You've been spying on me? I didn't answer that. I just said, I know enough to realize this marriage isn't worth saving. I don't understand, she almost shouted. Why didn't you say anything? We could have talked, worked through it. No, I cut her off. We've talked enough. For 10 years, I listened. I trusted. I gave. And you took. There was silence on the line. Then her voice shifted, softer, almost sweet. Too sweet. Ethan, if this is all some kind of misunderstanding, I can explain. I just need to know. I have proof, Ashley. Bank records, the hotel in Vermont, emails, everything. She didn't speak for a few seconds. Then, so you want to destroy me? No, I don't want to destroy anyone. I just want back what's mine. That afternoon, Ashley came home early. I was at the kitchen table, laptop open, pretending to work. She walked in, not angry, but cold, like someone who had already moved from shock into defense mode. My lawyer's going to fight this, she said, placing her purse on the table. I know. You can't just claim the entire inheritance. We're married. Everything gets split. I met her eyes. Unless one party committed fraud, the law's clear. And you think you're better than me, she scoffed. You think just because you were busy working, I'm automatically the bad one? Infidelity isn't caused by someone being busy, I said, standing. It's a choice. I chose to trust you. You chose to lie. She looked away, jaw clenched. Her shoulders trembled slightly. I couldn't tell if it was rage or the realization that the game had changed. That night, Sarah sent me our legal strategy. We'd demand full retention of the inheritance under the trust clause and base the rest of our division on a breach of marital trust. There would be mediation if Ashley agreed. If not, we'd go to court. I signed off on every page, no hesitation, no regret, because I'd come to understand this marriage didn't need a dramatic ending. It needed a final one, clean, legal, irreversible. The next day I moved out, into a temporary apartment near the office. Before leaving, I left a single piece of paper on the kitchen counter. Not a farewell, not an accusation, just one line. Thank you for teaching me the most expensive lesson of my life. I woke up earlier than usual, not from anxiety, but from the sense that today marked a point of no return. In front of the mirror, I straightened a gray tie, the color of my neutrality. I wasn't going there to win. I was going to end it, cleanly, finally, and without regret. The mediation room was in a glass building downtown. No judge, no cavil, but the pressure was unmistakable. In this cold, quiet space, every word could tip the balance. I arrived 10 minutes early. Sarah was already there, flipping through the case file, her expression razor sharp. Today, she said, we have two possibilities, an amicable end or open confrontation. Be ready for both. I nodded. No more compromises. 15 minutes later, Ashley walked in with a new attorney, someone I didn't recognize. She wore a white dress and a silk coat. Her face was carefully made up, her posture as poised as ever, but her eyes were different. No defiance, no remorse, just the look of someone still playing a game. The session began with the neutral mediator outlining the process and goals, a private resolution if possible to avoid court. Sarah led with clarity and force. My client seeks to retain his full inheritance based on the premarital agreement and direct evidence of misuse by the respondent. She slid a folder across the table. Bank statements, emails, hotel invoices. Ashley didn't flinch. Her lawyer reviewed the documents in silence. After a few whispered exchanges, they responded. Our client acknowledges a misstep in using certain funds, but we dispute the intent. This was a misunderstanding, not financial deception. Sarah smiled faintly, then presented something new. A thin printed document I hadn't seen before. This is supplementary evidence, she said, collected legally during the waiting period before this mediation. I glanced at the heading. My heart skipped. It was a bank account, opened after Ashley received the divorce notice, in the name of Dylan Parker. The last deposit, $18,000, transferred from an account linked to Ashley. Ashley stiffened. Her fingers twitched. I didn't use the money, she stammered. It was just in case. Sarah leaned in. Just in case what? Why open an account under your boyfriend's name 3 days after being served divorce papers? Ashley turned toward me. I wasn't going to run away. I didn't know what would happen. I looked at her, not with anger, but with something colder, disappointment. You weren't preparing for the worst, I said. You were preparing for your escape. Silence fell. The mediator called for a 10-minute break. Outside in the hallway, I stood by the window watching traffic crawl through Boston's gray streets. Sarah joined me. We can take this to court, she said. The new evidence is solid. I nodded. I know. But if you want to settle now, she continued, we can still pressure her into giving up more. I looked at her. I don't need more. I just want this to be over. On my terms. Back in the room, Ashley no longer looked composed. She stayed silent while her lawyer spoke. My client agrees to return the full inheritance and waives all claims to postmarital assets, on the condition that the non-disclosure agreement stands. Sarah turned to me. I nodded. I don't need to tell this story publicly. I just need to no longer be in it. The paperwork was printed, Pages were passed around. Ashley signed with a shaky hand. I signed firmly, no hesitation. Without a word, she stood and walked out. No eye contact, no goodbye. Only a quiet exit, perhaps the first time in our entire marriage where she didn't get the last word. I stayed seated. Sarah tapped the documents into a neat stack. "You didn't just win," she said. "You held the line." "I didn't need her to lose," I replied. "I just needed to walk out upright." We stepped outside into fading daylight. No champagne, no fist pumps. Just the quiet walk of a man who had finally closed a door that should have been shut long ago. And now? I had named it. 3 weeks after the mediation, I received an envelope from Sarah's office. Inside was the final divorce decree, stamped, signed, and official. The word "finalized" appeared in italics at the bottom corner. A 10-page document, thin as air, but heavy like a full stop at the end of a decade-long sentence I no longer wanted to finish reading. I sat alone in my temporary apartment holding the paper. I didn't feel joy, I didn't feel sadness, not even emptiness, just a silence, like a storm had passed and left behind an open field. Bare, stripped, but I wasn't afraid of the emptiness, I welcomed it, because only when something is cleared out can something new begin. That week, I moved out. Not back to the old house. Ashley and I had shared too much there, and not all of it good. I found a loft in South End. High ceilings, raw brick walls, large windows pouring in early light. It wasn't luxurious, it wasn't pristine, but it felt honest, and more than anything, it felt mine. I painted the walls myself, installed the lights, bought an old oak table and mismatched chairs from a local salvage yard, drilled the shelves, hung the curtains, cleaned every surface. I wanted my fingerprints on everything. I wanted to be surrounded by things I chose, things no one else influenced or approved. I also changed the way I worked. I used to be the last to leave the office, taking on more than I needed, using busyness as a socially acceptable way to avoid going home. Not anymore. I handed off projects, took only the ones that felt meaningful. I made space for myself. Each morning I walked to a nearby park, stopped at the corner cafe, ordered a simple espresso, and sat on the bench by the playground, watching kids run, old men stretch, joggers pass. I brought a notebook, not for work, just for thoughts. One Saturday, Mark came over. He took a slow walk around the loft, nodded in approval like an inspector. "Quiet," he said. "Fits you." I needed quiet, I replied. We sat by the window with beers. He asked, "So what are you doing with the money?" "The inheritance," Ashley returned. I pulled a slim folder from a drawer and handed it to him. "I'm setting up a scholarship in Aunt Eleanor's name for students in design or architecture, kids with talent but no money." Mark looked at the papers, then back at me. "She'd be proud of you." "I'm doing it for her," I said, then paused. "No, not just for her, for me too. I need to make sure what was stolen becomes something that gives." From that day forward, I began building the foundation, contacting nonprofits, meeting with tax attorneys, sketching out a legal structure. I named it the Eleanor Line, not just a scholarship fund, but a defining line in my life. A break between past and future, between pain and purpose. No press, no publicity, no story on social media about the husband who got his justice. I didn't want the attention, I didn't need it. The real healing wasn't out there, it was inside. One day I received an email from a young woman, Lucia, age Amman, daughter of a single mother, first-generation college student. She'd just received her first scholarship check. In her message, she wrote, "I never thought someone like me mattered enough for someone to believe in. But today, because of this gift, I believe in myself." I read that message more than once, then sat in stillness, late afternoon light filtering through my windows. I didn't cry, but something shifted in me, something I didn't realize I'd still been carrying. For the first time, I wasn't focused on what I had lost. I was focused on what I had started. That evening, I walked along the Charles River. Streetlights flickered on. The air had a fall chill. I wore my coat, held a cup of coffee, passed couples holding hands, seniors with slow steps, students talking about midterms. I used to think my life had shattered, that the damage would follow me forever, but that night I realized something else. What broke me wasn't being left. It was that, somewhere along the way, I had abandoned myself. And now I was finding the pieces, not to glue back the old, but to build something entirely new. Winter came early. The first cold winds carried the scent of wet trees and the stillness of year's end. I bought a few new books, a jar of ginger tea, and a reading lamp to place next to the armchair by the window. My living space was small, but now it felt like the safest place on earth. One Friday afternoon, I got a call from the foundation office. They told me the spring scholarship cycle had received over 120 applications, and among them, 9 truly outstanding candidates. I asked for the files to be sent to me directly, not because I didn't trust anyone, but because I wanted to hold each story in my own hands. That evening I read through every resume, every letter, dreams scribbled in half-formed English, pain written in clumsy but heartfelt paragraphs. There was a boy from Detroit, 18, who had lived in a truck with his father, but scored near perfect on the SAT. A girl from rural Georgia who lost her mother at 12 and learned to draw using the back of newspaper ads. I don't know why, but I cried when I read the last letter, only a few short lines. I don't want to study to escape poverty. I want to study so I can redraw the world with more color. I sat still for a long time. The tears weren't from sadness. It was something else, something beautiful. I once believed the world was full of people who only took. But here I was, discovering so many who only needed a chance to give more. I haven't seen Ashley since the mediation, but one day in January, I caught a glimpse of her leaving a building near South Station. She was with another man holding his arm. She didn't see me. I didn't hide. I simply stood across the street and watched. I didn't feel pain, not anymore. She was part of my life, once familiar, once haunting, once cruel. But now she was just another woman among thousands, walking her own direction down a different street. That night, I called Mark and told him what happened. "Did it sting?" he asked. "No," I said. "I just felt light, like I finally took off a backpack I didn't realize I was carrying upside down." "Then you're done," Mark said. "You've made it through." I paused, then replied, "No, I'm not done. I just stopped running." Spring came. I returned to an old personal project I had long abandoned, designing a youth community center. There was no big budget, no donors, but I didn't need one. I wasn't doing it for profit. I was doing it because I wanted a space where kids like Lucia could draw, read, learn to code, or just sit quietly without being asked to leave. I worked with the city council to repurpose an old abandoned building near the docks. I called the project Horizon, a new line on the map. The groundbreaking ceremony was small, maybe 30 people. A light Saturday morning sun. Among them, I saw a girl, standing quietly behind a wooden column. It was Lucia. She had arrived early, carrying a pastel chalk drawing of a house, a tree, and a line of messy handwriting that said, "A place where the broken begin again." I framed that picture and hung it in my office. Not as a reminder of pain, but as a promise that things could start over if you're brave enough to stop and turn around. Sometimes late at night, I still flip through my old journal, the one I filled during the worst of it. Lines like, "I don't know who I am without her," or, "If she betrayed me, then what part of me was ever real?" Or, "I let someone else decide what I was worth for too long." Those questions remain, but I no longer need answers. Because I understand now, my value doesn't require validation. I am Ethan Walker. I'm the man who stood up after being shattered by the person I trusted most. I'm the man who chose not to become bitter or vengeful. I didn't save my marriage, but I saved what was left of myself. And for me, that's enough.